Hey guys, welcome back to Books of Jazmin, because who doesn't? Where we talk about books, and of course, you guessed it, books. I'm your host, Jazmin Rivera. Today we have one special guest, Naomi, and we're going to be talking about the top 10 most memorable reads. So today we're talking about my top 10 most memorable reads. Now, these aren't necessarily books that I loved, but just ones that, like I said, are the most memorable. So sit down, grab some popcorn, and don't forget your credit card and Amazon account to buy these books ASAP, girl. Also, before we get started, most of these books options will contain spoilers for the books mentioned, just a heads up. Okay, so in podcast numero uno, I talked about some books that I liked and recommended, which included Legend, a 3-novel series with one novella, blah, blah, blah. You've heard that before. Today we're going to be talking about the last book in the series called Champion. So Champion, Day loses his memory to a tumor we found out in Prodigy. So Day doesn't remember June, and because of how much trauma June had caused Day, she decided to let him forget her. So sad. After a couple years of her living without Day and even trying to date other people, they meet again in a subway, and when she sees Day and his little brother Eden, who is much older now, instantly recognizes her, and as June is passing them, Day asks her if she's the girl everyone's talking about. How everyone always asks about the girl who he sacrifices himself over for again and again, and if she was the girl who he couldn't have conquered the world without. I remember this scene so vividly, and I will never forget it. Just something about the lost hope and ominous ending, someone help me out, makes me crave more. I'm still not satisfied with The Enemy Gotten Rebel, and I hope Mary Lou, the author, comes out with another book or novella. Just one that involves Day and June and where they are. Of course, we have the staple. If anyone who's anyone, aka anyone who's on Book Talk, knows Cruel Prince by Haley Black. Oh my. So Cruel Prince, there's this girl named Jude Dwart. She is a bad bee. Her twin sister, on the other hand, is just a bee, but that's irrelevant at the moment. So when Jude was a youngin', this dude named Maddox killed both of her parents because Jude's mother tried to flee with him, aka tried to flee with him, her father, and was successful for a couple years, and then, well, you know. So Maddox is a fae and takes all of Jude's siblings to live in the fae world. She has a twin, like I mentioned, and a half-sibling, and when the book takes place, she also has a half-brother that happens to have horns. It's weird. Jude, growing up, feels so hopeless as a mere human surrounded by fae, where everybody could most likely kill her in seconds with their unnatural powers. So as her stepfather teaches her and her siblings to sword fight from a young age, she begins to seek interest in it, while her twin is more interested in getting married and dressing up with dresses. Jude becomes a skilled swordsman and wants to compete in a tournament, but there are some obstacles, and I'm pretty sure the plot changes like 6 different times. Cardin's a fae that literally tries to kill Jude and her sister, throws dirt in her food, manipulates her, and is somehow still a good guy. I mean, he's a horrible person, but character development people. He turns out to be a really good guy, believe it or not. Okay, well, actually, he isn't a good guy per se, more like a good guy to Jude and what she's fighting for. I love Cardin because he's the worst of the worst, and still love Jude for all their horrible, horrible drama. Okay, and this next part is brought to you by Naomi. She is my book friend from Toronto, Canada. So thank you so much, Naomi, for doing this, and she's going to be talking about why The Cruel Prince was so memorable to her.
The reason why the Cruel Prince series was so memorable for me was because I think of the level of detail that went into the books and how everything kind of had, like, if you didn't really understand something or if you had questions about it, the book would kind of answer that, or things would be explained like properly compared to other books where it doesn't really do that, and you're kind of left wondering like what was that, what happened. And then I really liked the romance in it, even though that was a subplot. That's kind of why I read it. But the politicalness, like the political part of Cruel Prince was also like really interesting to me. And I really enjoyed the political part, even though it wasn't the main focus of it. But
Okay, now, Stalking Jack the Ripper. This, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I get most of my book recommendations from Book Talk, including this one, but this wasn't one of the ones that's like a staple. I feel like a lot of people don't actually know about it. Maybe that was just me. But Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. So Audrey Rose oh my gosh, I always forget to put her last name. Audrey Rose Wadsworth is our main character, and she's so sick of her father and brother wanting her to be a proper woman, like the 17 and 1800s, because that's when this takes place. I don't know the exact year, but it's very dark academia-esque. Audrey likes following in her uncle's footsteps as a mortician. Everything starts when she's finally allowed to go to her uncle's classes, where he teaches other young men about what causes what injuries and how to tell how much anger they kill used by how much blood they spilled. Love the profiling in it. Audrey meets this boy, Thomas, and it's sort of an enemies to lover situation because they're both trying to seek her uncle's approval and are used to being the better in a room full of people. Then there's a killer who's brutally killing a bunch of women. I said that way too enthusiastically. Anyways, Audrey decided she will do this by herself to prove herself. But not if Thomas can help it. At first, he's just trying to protect his boss's niece, but then he starts wanting to protect her for himself. This book is so good. So good. The banter is immaculate and is so well done. The plot, Audrey has no clue who it is, and the piece fits like so many people in different ways. Now, I'm not gonna spoil who it is, but I figured it out a little while before the protagonist did, which I'm very proud of if I do say so myself. I usually want to wait a little bit before buying sequels, and then like a month later, all of a sudden, I just remember the series and want the book next ASAP, but I wanted this book literally right after, which is super unusual. I still haven't read the new book because I'm trying to read the books that I have, but it's getting really difficult. I will randomly think of this book and feel the need to buy the sequel ASAP. Another book that had me kind of questioning everything was Beware the Girl by Teresa Tone. So in this book, there's one of those endings where it's like, we're going to make you confused for the rest of your life because it's standalone, and we're not going to tell you what is happening. We're just going to let you interpret it whatever way you want, which is strongly difficult for someone with OCD and anxiety who always thinks and needs the answer to be happy in life. Very difficult. The whole plot is a girl trying to go to Harvard, but she's a broken teen and has nobody to help her, so she manipulates this other rich girl with addiction issues and her father who's never at the house. The plot changes like 3/4 the way through, and honestly, I did not see that problem coming when I first bought the book. I was just staring at my book in confusion and a desire to throw my book across the room. Only read this book if you want to suffer terribly. It's an amazing book. I have been waiting to talk about this book to someone who literally has to listen. For example, for a project where I literally get graded based on what I say, so my teacher physically has to listen to me. I hated this book so much. Okay, it's called Starry Eyes by Jen Bennett. I don't know how she's a best-selling author, but apparently she is. I've been waiting to bash the living life out of this book because I hate it. I hate it. Okay, so this book isn't the book that you DNF. It's the book that you read and cringe the entire time, but it's so funny because of how cringy and just terrible it was. Nobody can call this a novel. You can call this a poorly written Wattpad by like a 7th grader who's sick of childhood, but is just no. Read this book, but don't. If you want a good laugh in a time of utter despair, then read it. But if you're into more serious and actually good books, then don't. This book is also supposed to be friends to enemies to lovers. Meanwhile, the parents hate each other, and has great representation, but it's super in love and not enemy at all. The plot isn't even worth mentioning because of how little it actually has to do with anything. I think that the concept of the book and the whole childhood best friends to enemies to lovers is great, but this is so poorly executed. Jen Bennett could have done something way better. Even if it still was the same plot in the same book, there could have been such better writing, such better characters. I hated both of the characters. After that, lovely, I don't even know what to call it. Anyways, we have Wilder Girls by Rory Powers. Is there a sequel? Is there not? Is there going to be one? Who knows? Nobody knows. All I know is that I kind of need one. This book also ends with an ending where it's like anything could happen, which again, very difficult. This was my first sapphic book, which is a woman love woman in any way, so it can be pan, bi, lesbian, and honestly a great start to, like, it's a great opening door to sapphic books. I fell in love with the characters and the love interest. The main character wasn't really me, which is something I remember fairly vividly. I just remember one of her friends that got taken by these mad scientists was my favorite, and we were the same in the sense we both had no filter and we were kind of rude, which is nice to find in a book character. I felt really comforted by it, but considering that, again, she got taken by mad scientists so early on, it was... We Were Liars to Evocart was a roller coaster. Oh my. The entire time was interested. It got kind of boring at parts, but I stuck through. It's a short book. I held in there. It's about this rich girl who every summer goes on an island with her friends that she only sees on this island during summer, and all of their families, and I think most of them are cousins, and there's like this mystery that she can't remember a huge period of time. Everything's blurry and fuzzy and nothing pieces together. The end, that's where things finally piece together, but not in the way you think. I was so invested in the story that I didn't ever think about why this book was so heartbreaking and just cruel. Probably should have. I definitely would have been able to guess what would have happened had I just taken a second to actually try, but I read it in a day, so I'm not too upset about it. What type of cruel human would make that ending? The ending is not happy in the slightest. I love sad books, but I don't know. The dogs? You don't know now, but you will later if you read it, and I bawled. I don't want to admit that I cried over a book, but I did, and I didn't stop. I was so dehydrated and noisy, my mom thought something was seriously wrong. I was broken. I still think about it, and I'm still so hurt and betrayed by the author, but I loved every second of it. Continuing with betrayal and plot twists, we have Renegades by Marissa Meyer. Renegades is a fantasy dystopian where certain people with unknown potential to have powers are faced in a life or death situation, or in extreme stress or grief they develop powers. There isn't a way to tell if you're capable until you either do or don't gain powers. For our main character Nova, she was sleeping when both her parents and youngest sibling, like a newborn baby, were killed, and after that day she couldn't sleep and didn't need it. Our girl Nova here is known as Nightmare, her villain name, needs a way to take down the system from the inside after her uncle died and she was on her own. So she competes in this competition held yearly for people trying to show off their powers in hopes of becoming a renegade, a superhero and protector essentially, and she is accepted by Adrian's team, the guy who gave false hope to her father, which ultimately caused his death and is also the leader of the whole superhero thing, who is a total sweetheart, and it just so happens he had an opening on his team and needed a temporary team member, and she was perfect. You know how usually the whole thing is a broody, sarcastic, arrogant male, and the girl is shy, goody two-shoes? Yeah, well, not this. Adrian actually accepted her, not because of her superpowers, wow, she doesn't have to sleep, but because of her amazing fighting abilities. He's just such a sweetheart. Like, that, it just doesn't give him enough credit. There's so much more detail about how things go down, and it's pure gold. I cannot express to you in words how much I ate this scene up. The whole time I was there like cheering on Nova and wishing I could beat a rock man to a pulp, but no. The romance isn't the whole plot, but when things get boring, it's what makes it worthwhile. And it was so cute. Okay, so these books are out of the same series, but Assassin's Blade takes place before the first book, Throne of Glass. They're both by Sarah J. Maas, who is a very problematic and talented author. In Assassin's Blade, you see Celiana. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, but I don't know how to pronounce it, working for a man who was like her father and saved her life. In Throne of Glass, we see how even the people who you thought loved you most can betray you. These books are action-packed, and although the plot changes drastically in Queen of Shadows, the book in the series before that are good, the books, I'm not gonna lie to you, the books only get worse. I'm not going to lie. After Air of Fire, which is, I believe, the 4th book, it sucks. It's a 7-book series. The last book is almost 1,000 pages. It's beautiful. took me a while. And you just want to know the ending, so you stay because you've already put so much time and effort into it that you can't stop now, but you want to finish the series, so you stay that you finished it, but it's boring, a little repetitive in the sense of a bad guy's a horrible person, kills loved ones, they make a plan fails, and they just freestyle it from there. Big moment, nobody thinks the guy will win, psych, good guys win, and like 4 people die. Assassin's Blade, that's the thing that broke my heart to a point where it will never be mended, and I'm okay with that. I love feeling the empty pain when I think about it, but I don't know how I survived without reading it, and now I'm contemplating why I'm currently living because I read it. This concludes our podcast for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on Books of Jazmin, because who doesn't? I'm your host, Jazmin Rivera, and can we just get a round of applause for our special guest today? Thank you, Naomi, all the way from Canada. Even though it was just a Snapchat video, it's still all the way from Canada. And make sure to tune in next week's episode, aka never, because this is the very last episode. Thank you.